In October of 2000, police in Pakistan uncovered what initially appeared to be one of the most important archaeological discoveries in modern history. Inside a house near the borders of Iran and Afghanistan sat a stone sarcophagus containing a perfectly preserved mummy. The body was wrapped as ancient Egyptian mummies were wrapped. Gold covered the face and chest. Cuneiform writing surrounded the coffin, and according to the inscriptions, the woman inside was supposedly a long-lost daughter of the Persian king Xerxes. Experts believe they may have discovered the only known remains of Persian royalty from more than 2,500 years ago. But within months, the entire story began collapsing. Who was the Persian princess? And why did carbon dating reveal such horrifying results? Here we go. This story began with a videotape. In October of 2000, Pakistani authorities learned that a man in Karachi was attempting to sell a mummy on the black market for an estimated $11 million. The man was identified as Ali Akbar. Police later discovered that Akbar was circulating a tape showing the body inside an elaborate coffin, hoping to attract wealthy buyers interested in rare antiquities. At first, the entire thing sounded absurd. Mummies are already rare discoveries. But a previously unknown Persian royal mummy would have been almost unprecedented. During questioning, Akbar reportedly told investigators he was not the true owner of the mummy. Instead, he directed police toward a tribal leader named Wali Mohammed Riki, who lived in Quetta near the borders of Afghanistan and Iran. When investigators arrived at the property, they discovered the mummy stored inside a wooden shrine-like container. Inside sat a stone sarcophagus, and inside that was the body. Even experienced investigators reportedly struggled to process what they were looking at. The mummy appeared remarkably elaborate. The body rested on a reed mat coated with wax and honey. A gold mask covered the face. A golden crown sat across the forehead. The coffin itself was carved with symbols associated with ancient Persia, including the Pharaoh symbol linked to Zoroastrianism. Most importantly, cuneiform inscriptions appeared across the coffin and chest plate. One translation read, "I am the daughter of the great king Xerxes. I am Rodagun." That single line would become extremely important. Rodagun was believed to have been one of the daughters of Xerxes I, ruler of the Achaemenid Persian Empire more than 2,500 years earlier. No confirmed remains of Persian royalty from that era had ever been discovered. Suddenly, Pakistan appeared to possess one of the most significant archaeological finds in the world. The mummy was seized and transported to the National Museum of Pakistan in Karachi. News spread internationally almost immediately. Archaeologists, historians, journalists, and collectors became fascinated by the discovery. But even during those early days, there were already problems with the story. According to Riki, the mummy had originally come from an Iranian man named Sharif Shah Baki. Baki allegedly claimed he discovered the sarcophagus after an earthquake near the Pakistan-Iran border. The story sounded dramatic enough to attract headlines. But investigators would later struggle to verify almost anything about him. Authorities could not even confirm whether Sharif Shah Baki was his real name. And despite the enormous attention surrounding the case, he eventually disappeared entirely. No one seemed able to find him again. Meanwhile, experts examining the mummy started noticing details that did not fit together. The deeper they looked, the stranger the discovery became. Once the mummy arrived at the National Museum in Karachi, experts immediately began trying to determine exactly who the woman inside the coffin was supposed to be. At first glance, many of the details appeared convincing. The body had been prepared in a style strongly associated with ancient Egyptian mummification. The coffin and inscriptions, however, pointed toward Persia. That contradiction confused archaeologists almost immediately. Ancient Egyptians famously practiced mummification. Ancient Persians generally did not. But during the reign of Xerxes I, Egypt was part of the Persian Empire. Some historians believed it was at least theoretically possible that Egyptian embalmers could have preserved members of Persian royalty. If true, the discovery would completely reshape historical understanding of burial practices inside the Persian Empire. Pakistani archaeologist Ahmad Hassan Dani publicly stated that the mummy appeared to date back to around 600 BC. That announcement transformed the case from a strange police seizure into a global archaeological event. The inscriptions became the center of attention. One translated line identified the woman as Rodugun. Historical records did mention a daughter of Xerxes with a similar name. Very little was known about her. No confirmed remains existed. That uncertainty made the claim harder to immediately disprove. The coffin itself appeared carefully designed to reinforce the illusion. It featured imagery associated with Persian royal symbolism. The Faravahar symbol was carved into the wood. Rosette patterns similar to those found at Persepolis appeared across the sarcophagus. To many observers, the level of detail made the discovery seem authentic. The story spread rapidly through international media. Headlines described the possible discovery of a Persian princess preserved for more than 2 millennia. Curator Asma Ibrahim later admitted she became emotionally attached to the idea that the mummy was genuine. For a young archaeologist fascinated by ancient burials, the discovery felt almost impossible. She later described it as a dream come true. And as the excitement grew, the question of who actually owned the mummy suddenly became political. As news of the Persian princess spread internationally, governments quickly began arguing over who the mummy belonged to. Iran reacted first. Iranian officials claimed the body was part of Persian royal history and demanded its return. From their perspective, the mummy represented a member of the ancient Achaemenid dynasty, one of the foundations of Iranian cultural identity. Pakistan refused. Officials argued that the mummy had been discovered inside Pakistani territory and therefore legally belonged to Pakistan. The disagreement escalated surprisingly quickly. UNESCO became involved. Diplomatic discussions started forming around the discovery. Then the situation became even stranger when the Taliban also attempted to claim ownership. At the time, the Taliban controlled much of neighboring Afghanistan and alleged the mummy may actually have been smuggled out of Afghan territory before ending up in Pakistan. Few people fully believed the story. But the fact that multiple governments and political groups were now fighting over the same mummy showed how enormous the discovery had become. Meanwhile, the body remained inside the National Museum of Pakistan. Security around the exhibit increased dramatically. Insurance companies reportedly hesitated to insure it because experts still could not fully verify its authenticity. Financial estimates surrounding the mummy became increasingly absurd. Some reports valued it at tens of millions of dollars. Others claimed it could eventually become priceless due to its historical significance. For the public, the woman inside the coffin was still viewed as royalty, a perfectly preserved ancient princess. But behind the scenes, several investigators had already started noticing details that made them deeply uncomfortable. The inscriptions did not read quite correctly. Some symbols looked awkwardly copied. And perhaps most concerning of all, American archaeologist Oscar White Muscarella soon stepped forward with information that threatened to unravel the entire story before it had even fully begun. Long before the international press became obsessed with the Persian princess, somebody else had already seen the mummy, and they immediately suspected it was fake. Months earlier, in March of 2000, a man named Amanullah Righi contacted Oscar White Muscarella, an archaeologist at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Righi claimed he was representing a Pakistani antiquities dealer. He sent Muscarella photographs of a mummy decorated with gold ornaments and ancient-looking inscriptions. The images appeared almost identical to the mummy later seized by Pakistani police. Righi also included a translation of the cuneiform writing. According to the translation, the mummy belonged to the daughter of King Xerxes. But Muscarella specialized in identifying forged Near Eastern artifacts. Almost immediately, he became suspicious. Some of the artistic details looked wrong. Certain carvings lacked the precision expected from genuine Persian craftsmanship. Some symbols appeared to be crude copies of authentic Persian artwork, rather than original ancient carvings. The problems only grew from there. After examining the inscription more carefully, another expert discovered major grammatical errors in the cuneiform text. The wording did not properly follow the structure of Old Persian language conventions. Even more damaging was the use of the name Rudugun. That spelling was Greek. A genuine Persian royal inscription from the era of Xerxes would have used the older Persian version of the name instead. To historians, this mistake was devastating. An ancient Persian king would never have referred to his daughter using a later Greek translation of her name. The inscription also appeared to partially copy the wording from the famous Behistun inscription created during the reign of Darius, Xerxes' father. It looked less like an authentic royal dedication and more like somebody piecing together fragments from historical texts they barely understood. By this point, Muscarella believed the mummy was almost certainly fraudulent. He reportedly informed authorities and cut off communication. But while doubts were growing overseas, excitement inside Pakistan continued building. Then forensic testing began producing even worse results. A section of the coffin underwent carbon dating. The wood turned out to be only a few hundred years old, far too recent for a 2,600-year-old royal burial. Investigators then discovered pencil markings hidden inside sections of the coffin carvings. The markings appeared to be modern guidelines, used before carving the symbols. Lead pencils, of course, did not exist in the Persian Empire. That discovery alone destroyed much of the mummy's credibility. Still, the most disturbing findings had not yet emerged. Curator Asma Ibrahim started noticing signs that the body itself looked unusually recent. There was visible decomposition fungus on parts of the face. The reed map beneath the body also appeared far newer than expected. Then scans of the body revealed something even stranger. Some of the tiny ligaments inside the ears remained intact. That should not have been possible in a genuinely ancient corpse. Even with mummification, delicate tissue structures normally decay over centuries. But inside this body, some remained preserved. That suggested only one possibility. The woman inside the coffin had not died thousands of years ago. She had died recently. Suddenly, the entire case changed direction. Experts were no longer asking whether the mummy belonged to Persian royalty. They were asking something far darker. Who was the woman inside the coffin? How had she ended up there? And most importantly, exactly who was responsible? To answer those questions, investigators transported the mummy to Aga Khan Hospital in Karachi for CT scans and X-rays. The goal was simple. They needed to see beneath the hardened shell of resin-coated wrappings without immediately destroying the body. What they discovered raised immediate alarm. The scans confirmed the body belonged to an adult woman, estimated to be between 21 and 25 years old. The mummy measured only around 4 feet 7 inches tall, making the body unusually small. But it was clearly not a child. Then radiologists examined the chest cavity. The internal organs were gone. The lungs, liver, kidneys, and brain had all been removed. At first glance, this appeared to support the idea of ancient Egyptian-style mummification. But the procedure itself looked wrong. Ancient Egyptian embalmers were highly skilled specialists, whose methods followed careful ritual practices developed over centuries. This body showed signs of much rougher work. Investigators discovered the brain did not appear to have been removed through the nose, as Egyptian embalmers traditionally did. Instead, damage suggested access had been forced through the lower jaw and palate area. The abdominal incision also appeared unusually large and poorly placed. Even more importantly, the heart was missing. In genuine Egyptian mummification, the heart was normally left inside the body because it was believed to contain the soul and intelligence of the deceased. Its absence suggested whoever performed the embalming either misunderstood ancient Egyptian methods or only possessed partial knowledge of them. The body cavity had also been filled with modern materials, including baking soda and salt, crude substitutes for the chemicals used in authentic mummification. Investigators later estimated the operation would have required enormous preparation, large quantities of chemicals, specialized tools, knowledge of anatomy, and a secure location where the body could remain hidden during the long drying process. This was not something a random smuggler could improvise in a single afternoon. Then, the scans revealed physical injuries. The woman's spine showed major trauma. Several vertebrae were fractured and displaced. Radiologists concluded the injuries were caused by blunt force rather than sharp trauma. The force appeared severe enough to damage sections of the lower spine and pelvis. And then investigators discovered the most disturbing injury of all. Her neck had been snapped. The spinal column showed a clear break near the upper vertebrae. Forensic pathologists later concluded the broken neck was likely the actual cause of death. At that point, the possibility of murder became impossible to ignore. Investigators still could not determine exactly how the injuries occurred. It remained possible the body had been stolen from a recent grave after an unrelated accidental death. But another possibility now existed. The woman may have been deliberately killed before the mummification process even began. That possibility transformed the atmosphere surrounding the case. This was no longer an archaeological investigation. It had become a potential homicide inquiry involving an unidentified woman whose body had been altered beyond recognition. As the fraud collapsed, attention slowly shifted away from the coffin, the gold ornaments, and the royal claims. Investigators now focused almost entirely on the woman herself. For months, people had discussed her as an archaeological object, a priceless artifact, a Persian princess. But once the forensic evidence emerged, the language surrounding the case changed dramatically. She was no longer being described as Rodugun. She became an unidentified young woman whose body had been chemically altered and publicly displayed, while the world argued over her value. That shift deeply affected several of the investigators involved. Curator Asma Ibrahim later spoke about how upsetting the realization became once the illusion disappeared. There was a real human body inside the coffin, and somebody had done terrible things to it. When pathologists removed sections of the hardened shell surrounding the mummy, additional details became visible. The woman's hair appeared naturally dark or grey, although the tips had been chemically lightened to blonde. Each finger and limb had reportedly been individually wrapped in imitation of Egyptian burial techniques. Experts believe the mummification would have needed to begin extremely quickly after death. In hot climates, decomposition begins almost instantly. That meant whoever organized the operation likely already had the chemicals, equipment, and workspace prepared beforehand. The body could not simply have been discovered weeks later and casually turned into a mummy. The timing was too precise. That realization created another deeply uncomfortable question. Had the perpetrators already been waiting for a body, or had they specifically acquired or created one for this purpose? Forensic specialists attempted to reconstruct the woman's face using skull measurements and regional facial characteristics from populations near the Iran-Pakistan border. The resulting image showed an ordinary young woman, not an ancient princess or queen, just somebody who had once, recently, been alive, and whose identity had completely disappeared beneath the story built around her remains. Investigators never publicly confirmed who she was. No family ever officially came forward to identify her, and despite the international attention surrounding the case, the actual victim gradually became almost invisible within the headlines. The media obsession had centered on the fantasy, the lost Persian princess, the priceless artifact, the international dispute. Once the body was exposed as modern, much of that fascination vanished almost immediately. But the investigation itself continued. Police in Pakistan launched a homicide inquiry and re-interviewed several people connected to the mummy's discovery and attempted sale. Investigators also tried again to locate Sharif Shahbaki, the mysterious Iranian man supposedly connected to the body's origin, but he remained missing. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of the case remained unidentified. Years later, the body eventually came into the care of the Edhi Foundation, a Pakistani charity known for handling unidentified bodies. In 2005, the organization announced plans to bury her properly, but delays continued. It was not until 2008, nearly 8 years after the mummy's discovery, that the woman finally received a burial. By then, much of the world had already forgotten the story. As investigators reconstructed the operation behind the fake Persian princess, one conclusion became unavoidable. This was not the work of a single person. The scale of the fraud suggested coordination between multiple individuals with very different skills. Someone had created the gold mask and chest plate. Someone carved the wooden sarcophagus. Someone copied and inscribed the cuneiform writing. Someone sourced the chemicals used during mummification. And somebody possessed enough anatomical knowledge to remove organs and prepare the body. Even the drying process alone would have required major preparation. The operation also needed time. It needed privacy. It needed specific tools. Investigators increasingly suspected the fake had likely been created in Iran, before eventually entering Pakistan through smuggling routes near the border. Oscar White Muscarella strongly believed the forgery originated from one of the major artifact faking networks operating in the region, and there were signs the perpetrators possessed at least some historical knowledge. The forgers clearly understood enough about Persian and Egyptian history to create something superficially convincing, but they also made critical mistakes. They copied symbols incorrectly, used some wrong linguistic forms, and misunderstood key parts of genuine Egyptian embalming. The result was something strange. Not an amateur prank, but not a perfect forgery either. Sophisticated enough to fool large numbers of people initially, flawed enough to completely collapse under serious scrutiny. Then the case became even more disturbing. Reports emerged claiming 2 additional Persian mummies had appeared on the international market. According to some investigators, they seemed to be prepared in similar ways. That possibility terrified forensic experts, because if true, it suggested the Persian princess might not have been an isolated incident. There could have been others. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.